Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner. I'm co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin at 4700 Grover Avenue. Welcome to our forum. Our forums are free and open to the public and usually occur on Sundays at noon. For more information about our forums, you can go to our website at www.austinuu.org for a forum schedule. Today we have a great program. I'm going to let one of our forum committee members, Eric Hartman, tell you all about it.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's my honor today to introduce Andrew Wheat. He is the sort of person who strikes fear in the hearts of moneyed interests and their confederates at the state capitol, simply because he is an independent investigator of the influence of big money in Texas politics. And exposure and information sharing with the public are things that those folks don't want to see about what they're up to. Andrew is the director of research for Texans for Public Justice, which is an independent watchdog group. It was formed years ago to challenge political corruption and corporate mischief wherever those are found. Texans for Public Justice is known particularly for its first-rate research and public advocacy on matters of political reform, consumer protection, civil justice, and corporate accountability. Andrew and his outfit were the folks who brought to light the money trail that eventually led to the indictment and conviction of Tom DeLay and others for channeling corporate funds into the coffers of various candidates for the state legislature, and who were out to transform the state legislature and pretty well managed to get it done by that back channel. You may have read some of Andrew's award-winning columns over the years in the Texas Observer. I suspect if you've followed this storyline about money in Texas politics, you've also seen him quoted frequently in major media around the state. The quality of Texans for Public Justice research is such that reporters around the state routinely rely on them for a good corroboration or cross-check on any claims that are being made on this topic. Andrew's also had a history of doing some work before Texans for Public Justice with Ralph Nader and the publication Multinational Monitor. So he had some good practice before he came to the Texas environment. I, for one, am very eager to hear about what Texans for Public Justice are focusing on right now. And I suspect that that same question is keeping some people around the state capitol up at night because they know what the consequences might be of the exposure that Andrew and company could give them. So please join me in welcoming Andrew Wheat.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Everybody, thank you very much, Eric, and to the Unitarian Church here. As I was talking with Eric this weekend, we found out that he'd prefer I bring a PC computer, not the Mac I was going to bring. And when I turned it on, this old PC, and revved it up, there was a screenshot there of my son at a piano rehearsal in this very sanctuary. So that's not a sop to you exactly. I didn't intend it that way, but there it is. I'm also home again because my father was for many years until his retirement the Unitarian minister at Third Unitarian Church in Chicago. So I was raised Unitarian. My dad was here until after Thanksgiving, just left. And after he left, we passed a rule that nobody else could leave until we finish all the leftovers. So some of my other family members are here today. Talk to them afterwards. They need to learn more Texan to talk to their grandchildren. Because you're Unitarians, I know as well as you do that you share responsibility for the sorry situation we find ourselves in today. You share responsibility because if the Unitarians aren't going to change it, then nobody will. Texans for Public Justice was formed in the last century, 1997. We keep databases on campaign contributions and lobby expenditures in the state of Texas. so that we can write exposés on who's doing what to whom, who's paying who to do what to whom. Usually the answer is it's the 1% that are paying our government officials to leave the rest of us behind. So if you look at the way Texas government is modeled, it's very good at doing what it's set up to do. It takes care of the 1% and it leaves the rest of us behind. Texas is, of course, number one in many, many ways, many of which cause us shame. Number one in teenage pregnancies. My sister's here today with Planned Parenthood. That takes brass knuckles. It takes brass ovaries to fight that fight in the state of Texas. So we're happy to have her here today. But we're number one on a number of issues. Greenhouse emissions, toxic emissions, uninsured Texans. This is not an accident. This is how the system works. So let's take a few looks here at where we are. We often say that what we do at Texans for Public Justice is quantify what people already know. Put into numbers what you already instinctively understand, which is the government isn't really working for you. So I want to hit on a few of these numbers today, but not too many. I don't want to get overwhelmed in the numbers. In the 2012 elections just passed, there was $183 million raised for candidates for state office. An obscene number, and yet not as obscene as the source of that money. 150 mega donors, institutional and individuals, delivered 58% of all the money in the system. That's who your government officials work for, and they work hard for those interests. We live in a state that has a poster boy that is a good emblem of this system. We have the longest serving governor in Texas history, more than 10 years in power, more than $100 million in campaign contributions, with half of that money coming from about 200 donors. The governor does a very good job of taking care of those people, as we'll see. Go ahead, sir. Sure. The text up here says Governor Perry raised $100 million as governor. Half of that money came from about 200 mega donors. We do this stuff all the day, every day, but occasionally a statistic surprises us when we crunch the numbers. When Rick Perry ran for president, we decided to crisscross a database of all of his appointees when he was governor with his campaign contributions. What came out? 20% of that $100 million came from people he appointed to state office. That shocked me. I couldn't believe it. This is a patronage system par excellence. As you know, when Governor Perry ran against Kay Bailey Hutchinson, a couple of his regents at Texas Tech backed Kay Bailey and were soon asked for and received their resignations by some of the governor's stooges. This is a powerful patronage system. Another part of that system that we've looked at a lot is the Texas Enterprise Fund. This is the governor's taxpayer pile of money, his slush fund, his so-called jobs fund, to give money to private companies to expand or come here from other states. Those same recipients of those grants have given $7 million to Governor Perry or to the Republican Governors Association when Perry was the head of that organization. So the Republican Governors Association is a good way for state governors interested in the presidency to get exposure and money. So during the legislative session, Governor Perry can't take money from special interests, but he had this back door operating, which was the Republican Governors Association. Who was head of the Republican Governors Association before him? A guy named Mitt Romney. Who's going to head it now? A guy named Chris Christie. The tradition goes on, but apparently the Republicans don't see our governor anymore as a front runner for the presidency. I don't know why. When we look at the governor's check size, the breakdown, here's the number that matters. 2/3 of his money is coming from people that have given him $10,000 or more. That might be you, that might not be you. Here's a few examples of his top donors while he was governor. The big one, $2.5 million, Bob Perry, home builder from Houston who recently died. Before he died, Texas created its own agency for Bob Perry, the Texas Residential Construction Commission. It was billed as a pro-consumer body for consumers who bought lemon homes from home builders. The governor appointed all building interests to head the commission, including Bob Perry's general counsel. All the agency did was create red tape and hassles before consumers could get into the courthouse on lemon home cases. In an incredible development, the Texas legislature shut that agency down. They euthanized it in 2011 because they couldn't rationalize the taxpayer expense. It was a piece of garbage created just for Bob Perry. Harold Simmons, number 2. We have a picture of Dirty Harry Simmons, the billionaire from Dallas, lobbied the Texas legislature to create a nuclear waste dump, low-level nuclear waste dump in Andrews County over by New Mexico. Only one company bid to get that contract, that exclusive franchise. It was his. Initially, that dump was only supposed to take nuclear waste from Texas and 2 other states that were part of a nuclear waste compact. The compacts were created because the losers in Congress refused to deal with the nuclear waste problem. They kicked it down to the states, told them to find solutions. So we were in a compact with Connecticut and Vermont. We were only supposed to dump low-level nuclear waste from those states there. What happened? As soon as it was open, Harold went back to the governor's appointees, the legislature, and every session he comes back and he wants more. Hotter waste, more curies, more quantities. Nobody says no to Harold Simmons in the state of Texas. Thomas Dan Friedkin, if we have time later, he's a big Toyota dealer's dealer. He supplies the Toyotas to the dealers in 7 states. They had a big victory in the Texas legislature this year. Peter Holt has a Caterpillar dealership in San Antonio. Caterpillar getting a big Texas Enterprise Fund grant from the governor to open a plant here. The one I really want to talk to you about, because it's Thanksgiving, is Lonnie Bo Pilgrim. What a work of art is man. There he is. Lonnie Bo, Pilgrim's Pride Poultry in East Texas. He's done more for campaign finance reform in the state of Texas than any of us in this room ever will. In 1989, Lonnie Bo had a problem. The problem is, as it turns out, meat packing is one of the most dangerous jobs in America. People working at high speeds with sharp knives. Accidents will happen. Lonnie Bo wanted a little protection money, so he came to the Texas legislature. And he asked them to take out sharp knives and to eviscerate the Texas Workers' Compensation Program on behalf of big employers and against poor working stiffs. In order to sweeten the deal and to ease the reform through the legislature, our friend Lonnie Bo handed out $10,000 checks on the floor of the legislature in which the payable to line was left blank for lawmakers to fill in themselves. That led to a sweeping reforms in the early 1990s under Ann Richards, including the creation of the Texas Ethics Commission, which is where we get a lot of our raw data. If you move from statewide down to the individual lawmakers, of which I saw one in this room a couple of minutes ago, she said she had to leave. The basic figures are similar, although it costs less to buy a lawmaker than it does a statewide official. The winners outraised the losers 4-1. And if you look at this number as $10,000 and up, this is only 27% of the money for lawmakers as opposed to 2/3 for the governor, but it's still an obscene number. If you widen the scope to the legislature, you get some of the same old boys and some new ones, including Democratic givers. Steve Mostyn, a trial lawyer from Houston who made his fortune settling lawsuits for hurricane damage on the Gulf Coast. Charles Butt, of the H-E-B grocery magnate. Charles Budd invests a lot in public schools in trying to hold the line against vouchers. Trevor Reese Jones, one of the pioneers of hydraulic fracking in the state of Texas. Hydraulic frackers are big behind the recent Proposition 6 you just voted on to provide $2 billion in funding for water. Hydraulic fracking takes enormous quantities of water, and they've been bankrolling that initiative. John Now, an Anheuser-Busch distributor, and our old friend Lonnie Bowe. Here's some of the big institutional donors. Again, we got some trial lawyer money in here. These are both trial lawyers, Texans for Insurance Reform, Mostyn's law firm, and their nemesis, Texans for Lawsuit Reform, which has made it very hard for plaintiffs to win lawsuits in the state of Texas. The last two are top lobby interests in the state of Texas, AT&T, which buys up hundreds of copies of the governor's books, and Energy Future Holdings, one of our biggest electric utilities. You may be hearing more in the Future Forum when the Sierra Club talks about coal. Energy Future Holdings, now teetering on bankruptcy, owns a couple of the biggest, dirtiest coal plants in America. Some of you may be Wendy Davis followers. I saw a Wendy Davis bumper sticker in the parking lot. We did some recent analysis, Wendy Davis, of course, having her Twitter moment when she ran down the clock at the end of our regular legislative session to stop some intrusive restrictions on abortion in the state of Texas. In a special session following that, of course, they passed quickly. They are now law, although under litigation. We took a look at the money that Wendy Davis raised immediately following her Twitter moment, and it was like nothing we've ever seen before on a couple of counts. She raised $1.3 million in a couple of short months. A lot of the money was coming from places like California and the East Coast. More interesting to me, half of that money came in checks of under $100. These are real people, these are regular people, but it's probably unsustainable. How long can Wendy Davis maintain her Twitter moment in the limelight? How long could she maintain the interest of relatively small donors nationwide? I think it's probably unlikely that she's going to be able to maintain that buzz and that kind of fundraising, and that her fundraising as we go into this governor's race is probably going to change. Will it change as much as her adversary, Greg Abbott? Greg Abbott raised 1% of his money in the last cycle in contributions of less than $100. Greg Abbott's been interesting. He came out with some interesting ethics reforms he recently proposed, and over the course of his political career, he's been fascinating. A man who's in a wheelchair because of a freak running accident that paralyzed him, then going on to Texas Supreme Court to slam the shut the courtroom door on plaintiffs such as himself, and now as Attorney General of the state of Texas, coming full circle again from a tort reformer who now brags that his job is to go into the office every day and sue the federal government. What a transformation. What's wrong here? 26 million Texans, 8 million voters. We should have far more than 8 million, especially in some ethnic groups. Hispanic turnout in Colorado and California far exceeding our own. $100 million raised by legislative candidates, 95 checks of over $100,000. That's not $100,000 from one person, that's a single check. 150 donors gave 58% of the money. They own our government, you don't. What could be done? Simple reforms already in place in other places, yet to be struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court, but they're working on it. A simple cap. This is held up in federal government. This is held up in a number of other states. What if we, the people, decided that $100,000 per election cycle is enough influence for a single billionaire? What if? Imagine. The difference in the 2012 cycle would have been, instead of the $52 million the 1% did give, they could have given $18 million under $100,000 caps. Does that totally eliminate the problem? No. Does that totally eliminate their representation in our government? No. But it'd be a step. There are reforms that we could pass if we could take the government back. That's all I had, so let's chat among ourselves.
Thank you for your extraordinary work in trying to get people like Tom DeLay out of our government. So how do you keep a positive attitude when you see so much greed and corruption on a kind of daily basis? What keeps you positive about Texas politics?
Well, I think almost as a necessity in this line of work, you have to have a sense of humor, and it gives, it rewards. I mean, people like Lonnie Bo Pilgrim, they're screwing us, but at the same time, I mean, you can't make these kind of people up, and they're real, and they're everywhere. I mean, the last time I spoke at this church, there was a gubernatorial election going on, and we had Governor Perry, we had Strayhorn running, we had Kinky Friedman, for Christ's sake, who was hilarious until he introduced his platform, which was terrifying. So, you know, there are incredible moments, incredible things that happen in the legislature, in politics. The overall trend has not been positive. We have made some minor progress and strides in the area of disclosure and transparency. But on the level of true reforms of campaign finance reform, it seems to get worse. The nature of the candidates seems to get worse. In the last election nationally, the Tea Party kind of took it on the chin. In Texas, they did better than ever. We used to think we had some bad statewide politicians. They're worse. They're trying to outflank each other on the right. It gets worse. And the things they'll say to outflank each other on the right, are outrageous. This transformation of Abbott is just incredible to watch. The tort reformer who's now bragging about suing the federal government. It's just astonishing, and it works. That's the scary part. It works.
We have a question here. Would you say your name?
Sure. My name is Fred Higgins, and I'm just curious, since we live next to Mexico,
Yeah.
we see a lot of examples almost on a daily basis of intimidation, sometimes assassination of journalists, politicians. I'm just curious if you ever sense any intimidation, or I'm sure you get a lot of bad emails, but I'm curious.
Well, I don't think we're considered enough of a threat. Like I said, we are not making those kinds of inroads. We get cranky emails, sure. In terms of intimidation, I guess the closest thing was when John Cornyn was Attorney General, and he was trying to get hold of a list of our donors and records, internal records, that, he never stood any chance of obtaining under the U.S. Constitution. So that was a political ploy, and it was not serious. No, I don't have those kind of threats or intimidation, but some of the comparisons are interesting. I mean, the money is flowing over the border. The narco trade is moving over the border and affecting things. There was a piece I wrote for the Texas Observer a year or two back that involved the narcos that were running a money laundering operation with racehorses here in the state of Texas. So they would buy up racehorses and use that to launder narco money. And that case ultimately came to court here just in the last few months. And it has since come out that the narcos were trying through an intermediary to bribe our U.S. federal judge here, Sam Sparks. They didn't get very far with that. But, there are disturbing things. If you look at our justice system, Mexico is a land where it's, where it's survival of the richest and most powerful, and that future isn't all that far away here in Texas. What I didn't talk about, which is perhaps the most upsetting part of all this, is you can talk to people about money in politics, and our legislators, our executive branch may be bought and paid for by special interests. But what people, especially outside of this state, find hard to believe is that our judicial system operates in exactly the same way. Our judges run for office in partisan political elections that are financed, by and large, by lawyers and litigants who have business in those courtrooms, because who else knows, who else is aware, who else cares? And in another system, in the federal system, if somebody in the courtroom gave money to the judge, that's federal bribery, that's a crime. Here, it's business as usual. That's how the system works. We just had a judicial reform conference with recently stepped down Chief Justice Wallace Jefferson, a Republican. And we had a lot of common ground. He realizes that's how the system works, but it's very hard to change.
Raise your hands high. We have plenty of time for discussion. Okay. Did you say your name, please?
Peter Durkin, and I was wondering, could you speak to the role of the media in all of this? It seems to me that they're the primary beneficiaries of all this unregulated campaign money.
Yeah, that's a very broad and complicated question, because for a number of reasons. One, of course, is the role of the media is changing, dwindling, shrinking, right? For a number of reasons. The advertising base has been pilloried. It's been wiped out by things like Craigslist. The classified ads used to pay a lot of the bills for media to hire investigative reporters. The staffs of these newspapers in our state and elsewhere are dwindling. There are buyouts all the time. The base is shrinking, and they have fewer and fewer resources to cover the kind of stories that we're talking about here. There is kind of a horse race nature to political reporting, which is maybe more what you're talking about. They tend to only give credibility to the candidates who are raising the most money. Is that the fault of the media? I'm not sure. I mean, money has a huge role on the outcome of these races. And especially, again, if you look at these judicial races, in Houston, there are 100 judicial candidates on the ballot. Now, the reason we vote for our judges in this state goes back to sort of Jacksonian democracy, prairie populism, at a time when Texas had very few people. Now we have a lot of people. People can't keep track of 100 judges. So what do they have to go on? All they have are the party label, and they have maybe if the name has a hint of ethnicity, which is a death cry in a Republican primary. We've had Supreme Court justices with names like Xavier Rodriguez. They have more money than anybody else, but they're up against a guy named Sam Smith, Steve Smith. The Republican voters go for Steve Smith, not Xavier Rodriguez. Nothing to do with the record, and what I'm talking about has nothing to do anymore with your question, the media. I'm worried about the media, and we need to be searching for more models. The Texas Observer has been around for a long time doing nonprofit. Their heart's in it. There's not a lot of money. They're young people with too much work. The Texas Tribune came along with a lot of funding, sucked up a lot of some of the best reporters from around the state. They're getting this funding that may be clouding what they can do. They're not doing a lot of great investigative reporting. They're doing some, but with the amount of talent they have, you'd expect them to be doing more of it. But what's the model that's going to pay for investigative reporting anymore? People are looking for solutions.
I'm thinking specifically of television commercials and all the money that goes into paying for that. Does that not influence their thinking?
Of course it does. I mean, the broadcast companies like to argue that the amount of money they receive from political funding is less than what they get for commercial. They act like it's a hassle. they are drowning in money in political system, in the political season. They are drowning in that money, and they don't want to change. For a while, some of the best media people in the country were pushing for a reform that has to do with the fact that we, the people, own the airwaves. We should have the ability to take them back and to allow discounted or even free media time for candidates. There are airwaves. We can force broadcasters to do that. But the broadcasters kill those. Those kind of bills, those kind of proposals die in the back room.
We have a question from Russell Eskew.
I heard on the news that Tom DeLay got all the charges against him dropped. What's the case?
That's the case. I guess it's truth in advertising. His name was always DeLay. And this case has dragged out forever. The introduction suggested that my group was involved with the original charges against Tom DeLay, and that's true. My boss, Craig McDonald, filed the complaint with then Travis County DA Ronnie Earl. I was not there. I was AWOL. And the reason why is the kid who was playing the piano was a premature baby in California. I was stuck for 4 months while he was in the unit there. And that's when the initial complaint was filed. We did a lot of work after that around the numbers and so forth. He was tried and convicted, of course, here in Travis County. Early on, there were appeals on procedural matters that went to the Third Court of Appeals here in Travis County. Republicans, judges there, early on reached out and grabbed a matter that wasn't even before them and said, well, this wasn't even part of the decision, this was the dicta. They said that, well, you can't charge Tom DeLay for money laundering in Texas because it wasn't money, it was checks. So the Tom DeLay case is very partisan, of course, from the beginning. Tom DeLay has complained up and down that he's being tried for politics as usual. There's a huge amount of politics. And in this latest wrinkle, this went up to the court. The court this time relied on a slightly more sophisticated argument than checks aren't money. But still, it's procedural. It'll go up to the Court of Criminal Appeals, which, of course, is an all-Republican court. But last time the Court of Criminal Appeals had an appeal in this case, it was the money check issue. They slapped that back down. I don't know. At a certain level, he's out of office. He's no longer dancing with the stars. Was justice done? I don't know. But people with a lot of money can tie things up in court for a very long time.
We have another question here. Would you stand and say your name?
My name's Hamilton Richards, and I was fortunate enough to attend that Money and Justice Forum last week, where you were one of the organizers. In the breakout groups at the end of that forum, one of the most popular ideas for trying to curb the effects of money in judicial politics was public funding. What's your opinion on the best way to attack this problem, not only for judicial elections, but for legislative elections and political appointments, for that matter?
Yeah, so the question's about public financing as a solution to our campaign finance woes. And, I'd like to be more hopeful, but I don't think it's happening in my lifetime in the state of Texas. Members of the legislature, members of Congress have, popularity ratings beneath that of car dealers. And so people understandably are a little concerned about giving public financing to the rascals. And even though it might result in a far better system without the kind of problems that we have today, it's a tough sell to make to the public. So, in the shorter term, we seem to have more chance of success with some of these ideas of a limit. Even those are extremely difficult. And on the judicial selection front, I think that we'd probably have more success selling one of these thumbs up, thumbs down sorts of programs. So one of the potential ways to reform judicial selection is, I am no fan of Governor Perry. I don't know if that came out. But even I think we would have a better system if Governor Perry appointed our judges. Why? Because people know who Governor Perry is. There's some level of responsibility. People don't know who these judges are. They can't keep track of it. There's no accountability. So one solution is have the governor appoint judges and then have a little Jacksonian democracy left in the equation. When their term is up, have them come up for what's called a retention vote. And the voters can either say thumbs up or thumbs down. Throw them to the lions or let them stay in office. And that gives the voters some input, but it's not this crazy money fest that we've got right now. And it's working in some states, that system.
We have a question from Douglas Bauer.
I found your numbers that you presented in your presentation fascinating. You made a comment early on that even though the Tea Party may be declining nationally, it's still quite strong here in Texas. And I know I live in Southwest Austin, and our local Democratic legislator lost in the 2010 election against basically Tea Party forces. She commented that she could easily win if she could just get her constituents to vote in their own best financial interest. I'm getting to a question here, which is, since many of these people are of very modest means and a lot of the policies pushed by the billionaires are not necessarily in their own best interest, do you think there's any chance of getting the right wing base to support limiting money in politics? I seems like they would be suspicious of these $1 million checks coming from billionaires.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Consciousness among the voters, especially in a place like Texas, the working poor. How much time do they have in this state to give to these kinds of issues, even if they apparently would offer them a lot of solutions for real needs? The Tea Party is a mixed bag. This judicial conference, you heard my buddy Tom Smith from Public Citizen talk. He had to talk early because he was on his way out to East Texas to give a talk to a Tea Party group out there. And there are some strange bedfellow issues going on with groups like mine with Tea Party. The Tea Party do not like a lot of these scoundrels. Many of their policies are abhorrent, but they get the money in politics part of it. And so we had some odd alliances in recent times in the legislature. Early on in the late 1990s, we got some data from the Attorney General. The Attorney General came to our aid. That was Dan Morales, who has since gone to prison and come back out. Dan Morales ordered the comptroller to give us data on pensions paid by the state of Texas to lawmakers who had gone into the lobby. So you got these turncoat lawmakers who are making a fortune in the lobby who are still picking up a state pension for their time in the legislature. And this past, about 2 years ago, we asked for the same data. Why? Well, the Tea Party was going around, one of their big issues is like, let's wipe out pensions for public workers, because the firemen and the policemen are the only ones left in the world with a pension anymore. So they really want to get their teeth into this issue, and let's get those public employees. So we thought, well, let's get that data back again, and let's bring up this, because here's these turncoat lawmakers that are getting a pension for cashing in on public service. And we found out that In the ensuing 13 years since we'd had the data last time, 6 bills had been passed in the legislature to keep that data private. We took it to the Attorney General. We lost. 6 different laws had been passed 6 different ways to keep that information from being made public. A Tea Party guy introduced a bill to try to overturn that, but it got nowhere.
We have a question from Pat Beulah.
How much of your number information is available online or otherwise?
You know, there's a huge amount of it online. Our website is tpj.org. It's a very proletariat website. It's not particularly beautiful. Somebody supposedly is working on revising it, making it prettier. But it's got one thing a lot of websites don't have. It has content. There are more numbers than you'd care to see, more analysis than you can process there on money and politics issues in Texas.
We have a question from our forum co-chair, Leslie Currens.
You mentioned Wendy Davis's fundraising and also the lack of voting with Hispanics in Texas. And I wondered if you have any numbers on Battleground Texas, their fundraising, and the prospects for increasing the voter turnout.
We don't really have those yet. They'll be coming. We tend to run a little behind time, getting our databases in and up and running. You know, the rise of the Hispanic voter has been prophesized in this state for decades. You know, some of us are old enough to remember that horrific election with former George W. Bush supporter Tony Sanchez running for governor and the so-called Dream Team. We had a Hispanic and a black running and the big love fest. Tony Sanchez spent $52 million of his own money, which was arguably the worst thing he could have done because nobody volunteered to do anything in that election because, hey, Tony's the man. He's got the bucks. What am I going to do? Tony's got to pay me to do anything. It was a disastrous slate of candidates. I don't know. I think the demographics are there. I don't know, again, if this is something that's going to happen in my lifetime. We've seen change in Houston. We've seen change in Dallas, which are seemingly improbable places for change. It's starting to happen in localized area. The last statewide Democratic official we have elected was in 1994. Is this the year? I don't know. Can Wendy Davis even get a majority of the woman's vote? Can she? I don't know. I mean, that's where we are. So it's not to say it's impossible, but it's a very uphill run. It's not to say she shouldn't run. I think contrasts are good. It's nice to have consumer choice once in a while. We ought to have it, but I don't know that this is the year this can happen because just the numbers are brutal.
We have a question from Becky Halpin.
Thank you. So this question is a little bit far out there, but I don't think looking into the future it's going to be far out there in the future. Last week, Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Did a article on how the NSA gathering of information is now being used to, I suppose you could say, suppress dissidents just by labeling dissidents against corporations as terrorists. Then the NSA gathering of information is being used by police forces to share information with corporations about the dissidents. So thinking about Cornyn trying to get information from you, in the future, do you see that this could be used to suppress even further those of us that would like to work to, say, clean up government from corporate and moneyed influence?
Well, I guess the first question is there precedent? Of course. There's been government espionage on dissenters forever. and they have attempted to use it against dissidents forever. Does this look like the kind of system that could be abused or is already being abused? Yes, of course it does. I mean, it's incredible the things that are coming out, and are coming out because of a man which some people think seem to think deserves the death penalty. My in-laws are visiting here from California. Dianne Feinstein is like out for this guy's head on a plate. It's incredible what's being said and done about this. One of the top lobby forces in the state, we write a report every 2 years on the Texas lobby. And the cover of that report has a couple of young men kind of leaning like hookers into a limousine that has license plates that say AT&T, because AT&T is our biggest lobby client in the state. We now know AT&T has been a very willing partner with the government in this and has even been paid by the federal government for access to this data. It's ripe for abuse. It's just hard to say exactly the form that the abuse would take and how it would be taken. We're weakened in our position of fighting back, I think in part because of the Obama scandal involving the IRS and its investigation of Tea Party interests. Tea Party interests should be investigated if they're using the nonprofit's status, as should a number of groups on the left. The IRS needs to get out of the business of giving nonprofit status to political organizations that are involved in campaign activities. And that was badly handled, as have been a couple other recent issues with the Obama administration. And I should say, you know, the Obamacare thing is an interesting issue to me, because a lot of what I was talking about is big business paying for and getting its way. Usually when things get interesting in the Capitol, it's when two moneyed interests are clashing one against the other. That's when the sparks fly. But some issues are not particularly related to the money. They're more ideological, right? The women's reproductive services. Obamacare, there was a doctor in the legislature, Representative John Zerwis of Houston, was fighting for some way to get the Medicare dollars to Texas that our governor and our legislature rejected. Was that about the money? No, the money was on the side of getting paid. The doctors, the hospitals, they wanted that money. But in this case, it was ideology that ruled. Why? Well, we have a whole class of politicians that run in the state only pretty much on one issue, that they're against the federal government, that they're against the President of the United States. And I mean, that's the issue. So Zerwis was trying to find this creative way where we could take the federal Medicare money but pretend we were doing it in a Texas way and that it wasn't Obama money, you know. He lost that little tap dance.
We have a question from Eric Hartman.
Actually, if I can beg your indulgence, 2 questions. One, I want to invite you to elaborate on what sounded as though it might be an interesting story about the Toyota dealer.
Oh, yeah.
And also, I wanted to ask you about the particular controversy surrounding the role of Michael Quinn Sullivan and Texans for Fiscal Responsibility as sort of enforcers of right-wing orthodoxy by the way they channel money.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I might be able to pull something up on this other computer or not here. But the first question had to do with the dealerships. And this was a fascinating test case that occurred in our last legislature. What happened? A billionaire from California came to our fair state, and he wanted 2 different things. 2 very different things from the state of Texas. That billionaire was, what's this guy? He founded PayPal, Elon Musk. Elon Musk came into Texas and he was lobbying on 2 different things, which if you look at them in a vacuum, You might have thought that he would have got the one he didn't get and not vice versa. What did he want? Elon Musk took his billions from PayPal, and he wanted the ability to sell his Tesla all-electric car that starts at $70,000 each. He wanted the ability to sell that car in Texas without going through auto dealers. Auto dealers are one of the most powerful lobbies in the state of Texas. A guy named Gene Fondren, now dead and buried, was a former lawmaker who became the head of the Texas Auto Dealers Association. He wrote a blueprint law for a monopoly for auto dealers that's been copied in states all over the country. The other thing Elon Musk wanted that seemed far more outlandish than the notion that he could sell a Tesla to rich people in Texas without going through an auto dealer. He has galleries in Houston where people can come look at a Tesla. They can't drive it, nor can the employees there even tell the person visiting how to find the website where they can buy the car online. That's forbidden under Texas law. This being a free enterprise state, a pro-business state, you can't do that here, and you won't be able to in my lifetime. What else did Elon Musk want? He wanted to have privatized spaceships. He's already got some out, a testing ground outside of Waco. He wanted the rights to shoot private spaceships off of that southern tip of the coast of Mexico down where we meet the border in Mexico. He wanted a couple of things. He wanted to be able to, first of all, he wanted public funding. The poor taxpayers of Texas to pay Elon Musk to shoot rocket ships into outer space. He wanted tort reform. He would be protected from any liability from any avionics and rocket ship accidents that weren't attributed to gross negligence. Total protection. And he wondered if we could shut down a state park while he was shooting off his rocket ships next door. The legislature gave him all of that, but no break whatsoever on selling Teslas to Texas. And why? In one case, there was an organized constituency. In the other case, you had a couple of people from the Sierra Club whining about, we don't want to close down our park for this billionaire. It was a no-brainer for the Texas legislature. And the other question was Michael Quinn Sullivan. Well, that would take a seminar in and of itself. So the Tea Party, the Michael Quinn Sullivan, the Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. This is a right-wing organization that really traces its roots to our last Speaker of the House, Tom Craddock in Midland. Tom Craddock, an oil and gas conservative who gets taken out by Joe Strauss. We don't elect our Speaker, members of the House do. So the House members, with the support of some Democrats and some moderate Republicans, threw out Tom Craddock, and they brought in Speaker Strauss, who's somewhat more urbane. He's urban. He's an insurance executive. And they put him in power, and ever since, the Craddock faction has been angry and pissed. And it's part of this big rhino push, right? Rhino means Republican in name only. And so the Tea Party, the right wing, is always out trying to pick off what they consider to be moderate Republicans in the legislature. And they put a lot of money into these initiatives that's funded by a guy named Tim Dunn, an oil man and a crony of the former speakers in Midland. And so these are the guys who have really pushed after Citizens United some of the black money funds in the state of Texas. And there's a case that's now before the Texas Ethics Commission that involves Michael Quinn Sullivan and his use of black money. But they're fighting the Ethics Commission and questioning its power to question them. And this will be tied up in courts for a while, I should think. Dark money is a whole nother chapter.
Hi, my name's Diane Davis. Since this is apparently, it is an overwhelming problem, and there's a lot of things that are not going to change in your lifetime. What would you suggest for people like me who are not part of the 1%, where would be a place to start that you would think might make some difference?
Diane, I was hoping we'd get through this without that question. I almost had run down the clock, and you pulled a Wendy Davis on me. It's tough, Diane. I've been wondering that for years. And how do you get consciousness? How do you introduce any accountability to this system where money plays such a huge role? And it's, the money's talking, the money's walking, and it's not your government, Diane. I wish it was. And I wish I knew how you could get it back, I can cite the usual platitudes to write, your members. If they already know the score, they're either on the right side or the wrong side of the issue already. It's probably more important to talk with the people you know, organize in your own community. I'm not going to quite say armed struggle. There's too many people with guns running around this state. I wish I had the answer, Diane.
Well, I have a question. Do you think organized boycotts could be helpful?
I do. I think that's worth doing. Sure. Some of these kinds of companies, though, it's hard for us to boycott. Some of it's coming from government contractors, and unfortunately, we don't own the government. We put out a piece on, also related to Obamacare. Our governor, who loves to bash Obama, Obamacare, all things black man in the White House, has not been very vocal on the big meltdown of the Obamacare website. Just so happens that our governor in 2011 gave $1.8 million to the lead contractor responsible for Obamacare so that they could open a facility up here in Belton, Texas. It kind of shuts them up a little bit. Canadian company, right, exactly. While Canadian Ted Cruz was trying desperately to shut down Obamacare, our governor quietly subsidized the Canadian company that did shut down Obamacare.
Thank you for taking time to come talk with us this
All
Sunday
right.
morning.